guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to start off my new series where I wanted to talk about weapons that different armies used in different wars. And today I wanted to go over the Vietnam War specifically because someone asked me a question about this on a post. And I wanted to go over the weapons of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. Well, mostly Viet Cong, not North Vietnamese. I don't know how similar their arsenal was to the Viet Cong, or just really in general how similar their arsenal was, or if they had a standard weapon such as maybe like a Type 56 or an AK-47, SKS, that sort of thing. That could be an interesting one to look at, but I have my research here that I printed out that I'm going to be reading off of. Printed it out off some screenshots I took, printed out from the printer that way. So I think this would be interesting to be able to talk about, because I can already see there's a few interesting ones, some niche weapons on here, especially when they talk about captured U.S. rifles, because they talk about capturing M2 carbines, which I think are interesting, because that's not a weapon you really hear much about when you talk about U.S. weapons in World War II or any war in the 1900s, which I find interesting. Because when you hear about a carbine, or a carbine, whatever you want to pronounce it as, usually you hear about the M1 carbine, or carbine, however you want to pronounce it. So, yeah, we're going to get into this episode, and we're going to start off with the assault rifles. Alright, so now we're going to get on to the assault rifles and carbines used by the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War, which is mostly about the American intervention, from 1965 and beyond that, basically. So, what I want to talk about first is the AK-47 / Type 56, and they were both the primary infantry weapon renowned for their durability in jungle environments, and the AK-47 was the Soviet AK, basically, whereas the Type 56 was the Chinese AK, which, made by two different countries, essentially. And the SKS carbine was another one they used, and it was a semi-automatic Soviet / Chinese carbine, often used in the early stages of the war, which makes me think, I don't know how many times in movies or anything like that I've ever seen an SKS used, so that's kind of interesting. Especially when they depict, like, let's say Le Drang or something like that, or just some sort of battle in 1965 or some earlier one, just anything like that. I think it's interesting because it makes me wonder, how many did they have? That would be a very interesting question, like how much of each weapon did they have? Maybe that could be a few shorts I can make, I don't know, we'll see. But now we're on to the last little bit for the assault rifles and carbines, which will save the submachine guns and shotguns for next. So we're going to talk about the captured U.S. rifles that the Viet Cong had, which I don't know how similar all this is to the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, if you will. I don't know how similar this is to their arsenal and all that, so maybe if you're looking for that, I might have to do a different video on that, unless it's basically the same, so I'm not sure. But I'm sure they wouldn't make an improvised shotgun, at least the NVA wouldn't, but never know. But the captured U.S. rifles that the Viet Cong had was large quantities of M16s and M1 / M2 carbines, which were frequently captured from the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces during the Vietnam War. So the thing I find the most interesting about the M2 carbine is that it is a select fire variant of the U.S. M1 carbine, and it was capable of firing in both semi and fully automatic modes. And the M2 carbine was developed in the later stages of World War II to increase close-range firepower, and it fired up to 775 rounds per minute, which, if you really think about that, even though the MG42 usually had a fire rate of around 900 to 1,500 rounds per minute, depending on your ammo, that sort of stuff, if the gun is clean enough, whatever, that sort of thing. This thing was actually not far off in some senses of having a closer fire rate, considering, like, I guess your average is 1,200 rounds per minute with an MG42. And, you know, that's kind of your standard, I guess, for the MG42, 1,200 rounds per minute, sorry. You think that's like a little over 400 rounds per minute. So that's still quite a bit. So yeah, now we're going to get into the submachine guns and the shotguns that the Viet Cong used. So now we're going to get on to the submachine guns and shotguns used by the Viet Cong. So we're going to start off with the PPSH-41, an iconic Soviet submachine gun used in World War II, very iconic. It replaced the PPD-40 is what it replaced, which was made by Degtyarev, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. And it has a high rate of fire. Didn't write down the fire rate, but it was heavily supplied by China, probably after the Soviets ended up not donating, but shipping some to them, if I had to guess. There is also the MAT-49, which is not a Soviet submachine gun, but a French submachine gun, and it was widely used by the VC after being captured. VC being Viet Cong, keep in mind, after being captured during the First Indochina War, which is what some people apparently call it. Never really heard it myself, but I've mostly heard it be known as the French Indochina War, which very interesting there in the variety of weapons. You got Soviet ones, you got Chinese ones, you got just American ones. You got so many different countries of weapons, and there is more to come later on when we get deeper into different weapons. And they also had improvised shotguns, which I don't know if they had actual shotguns or not, but they also had improvised ones, which guerrillas frequently fabricated rudimentary shotguns out of galvanized water pipes in clandestine jungle workshops, which is kind of weird. I want to find a picture of that. If I find one, I will throw it up right here before I get into the next bit, which I believe is machine guns. And it is also sniper rifles. So when I'm going to throw up some pictures if I can find some, and then I'll get into the machine guns and sniper rifles. So that it was a picture of a Viet Cong shotgun that was improvised, and let me tell you, that thing looks cursed. I don't know whether that was a shotgun. That's just what people on Reddit were saying. I couldn't really find much of anything, but that's the only one that people were saying was a bolt-action shotgun, which is a very odd choice, but then again, I guess bolt-action would be a lot more simpler than making it semi-auto, so I guess that's fair enough. I can't really say much about that, but I mean, who knows? I'm not too sure what that's supposed to be, but it was mocked up to apparently look like a BAR, and it's kind of weird in the way they did that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I would love to maybe do a separate video on that maybe one day, on the improvised shotguns, if I could maybe find a book on it or a documentary of some kind, some sort of research that I could do for it. So maybe that's something I do in the future. But now we're going to get into the machine guns and sniper rifles that the Viet Cong. So to start this off, we're going to talk about the DP-27 / the DPM, which you may remember the DP-27 from Call of Duty or any sort of World War II shooter. And that was basically a pretty good little machine gun, I'd say. It had a little pan on the top that it'd feed from. And it was a Soviet-designed light machine gun, which was utilized for suppressive fire. And another one from World War II, not a machine gun, but a rifle, which was used as a sniper rifle, was the Mosin Nagant M1891/30, which was a variant of the Mosin Nagant, which this one would be equipped with scopes, and that was frequent what happened. So They were dedicated for sniper use, and the sniper variants, there was basically 3 different scopes they would equip with, which were basically what would identify, I guess you could say, or designate what they would be called, like the Mosin Nagant, with a PE, a PEM, or a PU scope. So the 4 scopes, or sorry, not 4, 3 scopes, the PE and PM specifically, were 4x scopes, and the PU was a 3.5x scope, which the PU variant was the most common because it was the most widely produced one of the 3. And it was introduced in 1942 during World War II, basically around a year or so after the Germans would invade Russia in 1941 through Operation Barbarossa. And so the last rifle, well, sniper rifle that I would like to talk about out of the machine gun and sniper rifle section of this video is the SVD Dragunov, which is a Soviet semi-automatic designated marksman rifle that saw limited use by the VC snipers, which is kind of interesting to think that they used Mosin Nagants probably more than the Dragunov, which is kind of interesting to me. So yeah, we're going to get into the heavy weapons and explosives now. So to get on to the heavy and weapons and explosives, we're going to start off with the Soviet RPG-2 and RPG-7, which were highly effective rocket-propelled grenade launchers utilized against bunkers, light armor, and helicopters. And they also would utilize mortars, which they would utilize 60 millimeter, 82 millimeter, and 120 millimeter mortars to bombard U.S. and ARVN bases, which they would get these mortars from Soviet and China as well, from like the Soviet Union and, communist China at that time. And they would also, interestingly enough, I did not know this, they would also have recoilless rifles, which portions of their forces were equipped with B-10 and B-11 recoilless rifles for heavy anti-armor defense, which never heard of these recoilless rifles, so this is new to me. And those, both the B-10 and B-11 are Soviet recoilless rifles as well, so interesting information. So now we're going to get into the improvised and World War II weapons, which is possibly going to be the most interesting part of this video. So we're getting into that. And so for the most interesting part of this video is for the improvised and World War II weapons. So improvised as in their booby traps that they had, which I'll get to after the World War II surplus weapons. But what I find so interesting is the World War II surplus weapons they've used. Now, I've already talked about a chunk of them, like the Soviet ones or just anything like that, but there is also some that I haven't talked about yet that I think are so interesting just because of the fact that I want to find some pictures of it right after I record this and put them after this. And it's because of the fact that due to international military aid and supply chains, the VC or Viet Cong used surplus weapons from earlier eras, which, I mean, they did from the Soviets as well, including German MP-40 submachine guns and carabiner, however you pronounce it. I was terrible. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce it. Carabiner, I guess, is how you pronounce it. I don't know. I'm not very fluent in German. 98K, so K98 rifles, and, bolt action rifles is what it was. So I think that's interesting. I'd love to find some pictures of other guns they used, because I'm sure there's much more weapons that would have to be talked about than just these. And I'm sure the list would go on and on and on because of all the different captured weapons they had. But these are just the main notable ones, I'm sure, that they had that might have been in pictures or might have been recovered when the Americans may have captured or killed them. They may have found that these weapons were on them, so it became noted somehow that way. Never know. But as for the booby traps, guerrilla tactics heavily involved unexploded ordnance, which very brutal, I'm sure it was, bamboo punji sticks, and concealed bouncing betties, which they put, quote-unquote, on the research here that I have in my screenshots and all that, which they did that to inflict casualties and demoralize troops, which, if they didn't kill you, they would hurt you. So I guess that makes sense in a way, because if they can't kill you, they're going to make you hurt like hell. So, yeah, I mean, really. We're going to get on to the outro to this video now and talk a bit more, just kind of summarize everything. To end off this video, I want to say thank you all for everyone who stuck around. Yesterday was also my birthday. I turned 22, so I'm recording this day after. And I hope this video isn't too long. And just for everything we both learned, y'all as the audience and me, I gotta say there's a lot in here I didn't know. And a lot I learned about, mostly with the weapons they were equipped with. Because you'd think they were just equipped with SKS, AKs, that sort of thing. And you knew they were probably equipped with Soviet weapons already, but you didn't realize, I mean, I knew they had Mosins, but I didn't know they had sniper rifle versions of Mosins. So that was interesting, too. But I also didn't know how much German weapons they actually had. And when I looked into it, I'm surprised that I never saw a picture of an MG42. Out of all the pictures I saw, it looked a lot like they had a ton of MG34 machine guns over the MG42. So maybe that's something I need to answer one day in a short. Maybe try doing the research as to why they didn't have any MG42s, if they had any, that is, because I don't know if they did or didn't. I'm just guessing they didn't by the fact that there was no pictures with them, but then again, there's a lot of guns that I couldn't find pictures with them with, so, I mean, maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but never know. So, yeah, thank you all for watching. We're at 352 subscribers right now as of time of recording, so I want to thank you all for that. And yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. If there's ever any questions y'all have for me, down below in the comments is where y'all can leave them. I will answer any of these questions through shorts, and maybe sometime I'll do a video on like a part 2 of the Viet Cong weapons, and depending on the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, I want to do one on them too eventually. I think for now I'm going to do the Vietnam War, and then I'm going to move into like World War One, World War Two, the Civil War, like the American Civil War, or I can move on to the Korean War, which, I mean, to be fair, the Korean War is kind of like, pretty simple sometimes. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, I don't know, but I think it'd be really interesting to just see all of the weapons used through any war. So if you ever have any questions, suggestions, let me know. And yeah, I will see you all in the next video. Thank you all for all the support, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day and a great night.